If you're interested in mastering your emotions, welcome back to my series where I answer the most frequently asked questions about healthy emotions. Today, we're going to dive into question number 11. How do emotions affect decision making? If you've ever made a decision that you later regretted, reacted impulsively under pressure, or stayed too long in situations that drained you or ignored your instincts, even when something felt off, this episode is for you. So sometimes people know exactly what they should do logically, but emotionally, they still feel stuck, conflicted, or unable to follow through. And that internal disconnect is often where emotional influence is strongest. There was a time that I believed that I was making decisions logically, and I thought that I was being rational, disciplined, and strategic. But when I looked closer at some of the choices that I've made repeatedly, overworking, avoiding difficult conversations, pushing through exhaustion, and staying in situations that clearly weren't healthy, I realized that emotions were influencing far more than I wanted to admit. So on the surface, many of my decisions looked reasonable, but underneath them was a nervous system trying to avoid discomfort, rejection, failure, or uncertainty. And I wasn't always responding to what was actually happening in that present moment. I was just reacting to what my mind believed could happen emotionally. Once I started recognizing that emotional layer behind my decisions, things started to change. And I stopped reacting automatically, and I became more aware of why I was making certain choices instead of only focusing on the choices themselves. And that awareness gave me a space to slow down instead of constantly operating from pressure or urgency. This question matters because your life is shaped by the decisions that you make repeatedly over time. So your relationships, career, your habits, finances, and emotional well-being are all connected to the quality of your decisions. The issue is that many of us separate emotions from logic, when in reality, emotions heavily influence perception, your attention, and your behavior. In other words, emotions don't just affect how you feel, they affect how you interpret reality itself. So for example, when someone is anxious, neutral situations can suddenly feel threatening. And when someone feels rejected, they may interpret distance when none exists. And when someone is emotionally overwhelmed, small decisions can feel enormous because the nervous system is already overloaded. So even in minor uncertainty can feel intolerable when the body is operating in a chronic stress state. So learning how emotions affect decisions isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming aware enough to pause, reflect, and respond intentionally instead of reacting automatically. It's also about understanding yourself deeply enough that your emotions inform your decisions without unconsciously controlling them. So how do emotions affect decision making? At the core of it, emotions affect decision making because the brain is constantly trying to predict safety, avoid pain, and reduce uncertainty. And the nervous system is always scanning for potential threats, discomfort, rejection, or instability, even in situations that may not actually be dangerous. That means many decisions happen emotionally before they happen logically. And so the nervous system reacts first, and then the mind often creates explanations afterward. And this is why so many of us sometimes justify decisions intellectually that were emotionally driven from the beginning. So this can be when someone feels anxious, the brain tends to exaggerate risk and urgency, and suddenly everything feels time sensitive. And decisions become rushed because emotionally the nervous system wants relief as quickly as possible. But slowing down can even feel uncomfortable because the body associates movement and action with temporary safety. On the other hand, when someone feels insecure or afraid of rejection, they may make approval-based decisions instead of authentic ones. So they would say yes when they mean no, they would avoid difficult conversations, they tolerate situations that just drain them because emotionally, conflict feels more dangerous than self-abandonment. And over time, this just creates resentment, exhaustion, and disconnection from their own needs. And this is why emotional awareness matters so much. Because if you don't recognize the emotional state you're operating from, you're going to often mistake emotional survival responses for clear thinking. And again, the goal isn't to eliminate emotions. Emotions are a valuable source of information. The goal is learning how to recognize emotional influence before it unconsciously controls your behavior. And once you understand that, the next thing to recognize is that emotions don't just influence decisions, they influence perception itself. And so the emotional state that you're in changes how you interpret people, situations, and even yourself. So when you're emotionally overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, ashamed, or angry, you stop seeing situations clearly. And your emotional state just begins filtering what you notice, what you focus on, and the meaning that you assign to experiences. So this could be someone carrying chronic stress may interpret constructive feedback as criticism, or someone operating from fear may see uncertainty as danger instead of possibility, or someone carrying unresolved shame may view mistakes as proof that they're failing rather than part of growth. Someone emotionally exhausted may perceive normal responsibilities as unbearable because the nervous system no longer has the capacity to process stress effectively. This is why two people can experience the exact same situation but respond completely differently emotionally. Their nervous system, emotional conditioning, and past experiences shape how they interpret what's happening. And emotional reactions are often tied as much to history as they are to the present moment. And for high performers especially, this becomes dangerous because chronic stress often feels normal, and they stay in pressure constantly without realizing how much emotional exhaustion is narrowing their thinking and reducing clarity. Eventually, the nervous system becomes so accustomed to tension that calm can actually feel unfamiliar or uncomfortable. And over time, this creates tunnel vision. Decisions become more reactive, and patience decreases, and emotional impulses begin driving behavior without conscious awareness. And the body just shifts into survival mode, and long-term thinking becomes much harder to access consistently. And this leads into another important point, that unresolved emotions often create repetitive decision-making patterns. So until emotional patterns are acknowledged, a lot of us tend to repeat the same emotional patterns in different situations. So many of us don't realize that we're repeating emotionally familiar behaviors because those patterns feel normal to us. And so familiarity can feel safe even when it's unhealthy. So for example, if someone who grew up feeling responsible for other people's emotions, they may repeatedly overextend themselves in relationships, or someone who learned to associate achievement with worth may constantly overwork because slowing down just triggers guilt or anxiety. Or someone who experienced instability earlier in life may become hyper-controlling because uncertainty feels emotionally unsafe. The important thing to understand is that these patterns are usually not conscious. They're emotional patterns that the nervous system learned earlier in life and continues repeating automatically. And in many cases, those patterns originally developed to create protection, approval, or stability. And because those patterns feel familiar, a lot of us often mistake them for personality traits instead of conditioned responses. And they might say, that's just how I am, without realizing those behaviors were emotionally learned over time. And that's why emotional awareness is so powerful. Once you start recognizing the emotional drivers beneath your decisions, you create the opportunity to interrupt those cycles instead of unconsciously repeating them. And awareness gives you the ability to respond from the present moment instead of constantly reacting from old emotional conditioning. So if emotions influence decisions so heavily, the question then becomes, how do you stop emotions from completely controlling your choices? And the answer to that is emotional regulation. Learning to regulate your nervous system creates the internal stability needed for clearer thinking and healthier responses. And when your nervous system is regulated, your brain has greater access to perspective, patience, reasoning, and long-term thinking. And you're then able to evaluate situations more clearly instead of reacting purely from fear, urgency, anger, or insecurity. And problems start to feel more manageable because your body is no longer interpreting every challenge as a threat. And this doesn't mean that you stop feeling emotions. It just means emotions stop hijacking your behavior automatically. And you can experience emotion without immediately acting from it. One of the most practical ways to build this skill is learning to pause before important decisions, especially during emotionally intense moments. Because most reactive decisions happen because people move too quickly to escape discomfort. So by noticing what's happening physically first and checking in and seeing, is your chest tight? Is your breathing shallow? Is your mind racing? Do you feel urgency pushing you toward immediate action? Those physical signals often indicate that your nervous system is activated and that emotional reactivity may be influencing your judgment. So instead of reacting immediately, slow the process down. Breathe deeply, step away temporarily if needed. You can even give your nervous system time to settle before making a major decision. And sometimes clarity comes not from thinking harder, but from allowing the body to calm down first. And you can ask yourself, what emotion am I feeling right now? What am I afraid might happen? Am I responding to the present moment or to an old emotional pattern? Will this decision still feel aligned once the emotional intensity passes? And over time, these pauses create space between the emotion and action. And that space is where intentional decision-making begins. As you continue practicing this, you start to build healthier emotional decision-making patterns overall. And your reactions become less automatic and your responses become more intentional. So start paying attention to how your body feels before making important decisions. To support you in building emotional awareness, I've created a free resource called the Emotional Breakthrough Guide, and I love to share it with you. Inside the Emotional Breakthrough Guide, you'll find step-by-step exercises that help you notice your personal triggers, reflect on emotional patterns, and begin responding in healthier ways. These exercises are designed to fit into your everyday life so you can start building emotional awareness and control immediately. You can get your free emotional breakthrough guide right now by clicking the link in the description below. And then once you do, you'll receive instant access to the guide so you can start using it right away. You can move through it at your own pace and start to notice small but meaningful changes in how you cope emotionally. As always, if this video helped you, I'd really appreciate it if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. That way, you'll be notified of the next video in this 23-part series on healthy emotions, where we continue building the awareness and skills you need for long-term emotional health. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.